right. Let's see. Kelly's adoring fans.
And yours.
Yeah,
Always
something
yours.
like that. Something like that. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Do Not Call Me Karen podcast, DCMK. I always trip over the acronym, and I don't know why.
It's all letters. Yeah, it's easier
Odd
to say,
letters.
don't call me Karen. Yeah.
Right. Too many, no constant, all consonants, no vowels. So, well, anyway, welcome back. So happy for you guys to join us for another episode.
Thank you.
If it's your first time, welcome. Hopefully, you'll come back and you'll check out the older episodes because we have episodes under our belt now. Man.
We do. Getting
this
a nice little library.
We are. We're getting there.
Season
we're getting
1.
There. Yes, yes. And so, Kelly, our talent. I can't think
Scout?
of the word. Yeah, the
Yeah,
talent
so
scout.
I'm
But
gonna
there's
put that on
actually-
my resume. Talent
yeah,
scout.
casting agent.
Casting agent.
There you
okay.
are. There you are. You have procured us another awesome guest.
Yes. Yes, we are super excited tonight to have my new friend, Nina Lucas, here with us. And Nina was actually introduced to me, or we were introduced to each other through Kevin 11 that was on this show. So, yeah,
Kevin's a
props to
gift.
Kevin again.
Kevin
yeah,
is a
he
gift that keeps on
he
giving.
does. He really
Definitely.
does. But he knows about some of Nina's work that she's passionate about, and he knows what we're doing, obviously, from being a guest, and said, you guys need to connect. You need to talk to each other. You need to get together. So, yeah, we had lunch, and I learned all about what Nina's been working on, and it's super important work that we'll hear about in a little bit. But first, just wanted to kind of talk to you, Nina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm very excited. Thanks for
We're
having
excited
me.
too. But you have, so you live here in New Hope,
I do.
which is a predominantly white community, and you were married to a black man.
Yes, I was.
And so you raised biracial children here.
I did. I
and-
am doing that.
Yeah, still, they're older than my kids, but
Right.
always raising them. Yeah. And so I just, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences? Because you kind of have this unique situation that you were telling me about with your husband, and he's very highly accomplished and, in government and military. And
Yes.
yeah.
Well, he's my ex-husband now, but
Right.
in any event, that doesn't take away from his accomplishments and his resume. So that is something that was extraordinary about him. And by way of his background, he was a veteran of 2 branches of the military. He was an enlisted Marine, and he was also an officer in the Army. Then he went on to Rutgers, where he was a Henry Rutgers Scholar. He then
I'm
graduated.
a Rutgers alum. Shout
I
out for
know,
Rutgers.
I know. So you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you were there together. I don't know. But in any event, then he went on to Harvard Law School. And he then worked his way up, and he became the general counsel of a Fortune 500 company. And also along the way, during our marriage, and this is so crazy, but he was nominated by President Bush, George W. Bush, to be an assistant secretary of agriculture.
Wow.
Big deal, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And that was a Senate confirmation, and, we had to go through the vetting process and all that kind of stuff, and that was very interesting and stressful. But in any event, then he had a stint in Washington and all that kind of stuff. So, he was a very unusual person. At the time, a black Republican is unusual, I guess, whatever.
More unusual now. Maybe
Yeah,
that was a different thing.
yeah.
But
So, we were living in Connecticut at the time, and, it was a small state, and he had a little bit of renown in Connecticut. And, it was all a very interesting ride. But we just had a lot of experiences, or rather, I viewed a lot of the experiences just being his wife, seeing what happens to black men in our society.
even super, super accomplished black
Yes.
men that are conservative
Correct.
Republicans.
Yes, because of course, when anybody's walking down the street, we're not holding our CVs out to say,
Right.
I'm a, whatever. This is what I've done. Don't bother me, which is ridiculous because no one should be harassed
Right.
or you shouldn't assume anything about anyone just from walking down the street. But the traditional stuff, always getting stopped by police, things like that. I mean, we went through all of that, and I can tell you a couple stories about just going to airports all the time. We were always pulled aside, things like that. And even though he was always very careful about what he wore, my ex never wore jeans, never wore tennis shoes. Was always dressed very well, and I know that was a strategy. And
Do you think about that,
yeah,
Brandon?
that's a good question.
As a resident black guy, here, right? I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I have subscribed now to the energy, like just my thoughts, my feeling. Like I walk with confidence, and I make eye contact, and I don't even like if I get pulled over or something like that. I don't get nervous, because I know that if I'm nervous, people pick up on that, so it can make things worse.
Yes.
So, yeah. So to answer your question, no, I don't. I dress how I want, where I want, and if I have to engage anybody, I engage with confidence. If I'm never anywhere where I'm not supposed to be, so so if you want to try me, you can. But that strategy has worked for me thus far, and I won't change it until I need to. So,
Right.
But it's interesting what you have to think about it. I mean, if you would ask the average white man, I don't think, and even me, I'm a white woman. I don't. Obviously, I'm a woman, so I think I don't go out at night alone and things like that.
Right.
But I don't think about, do I belong somewhere or do I not belong somewhere? Or do I have to worry about law enforcement? So I don't think about those things. But I know that other people do.
Yes.
So that's a
You
problem.
shared a story that just really resonated with me as a mom and living in this area and bringing your children when you didn't live here, but to visit family here
Yes.
one time.
It was around Easter, and we were always usually we always came down at odd hours because my ex was a very important guy, very busy.
Very busy.
Yeah, so
Sounds like it.
we would sometimes have to travel just late in the evening to come down here. So it was around Easter time, and we were coming through the Flemington Circle. And
That's just north of. Do you know where that is? Just it's
No.
it's off of 202, but just a
20
little bit,
minutes away.
yeah, a
Okay,
little bit.
all right.
And I don't know exactly why we were stopped. I don't think that he was speeding. I mean, we were going through the circle, so it couldn't be speeding. I don't remember. I don't recall. But in any event, we were stopped. And, I don't know if it was the nice car or whatever, but my children were so young to both be in car seats. So, they stopped him, asked for the ID and all that kind of stuff. And then they wanted to take him to the station.
What?
And they were sleeping. Like she had babies
Yeah,
sleeping in
they
their
were
car
in the car.
seats going to Easter.
I don't know why they ultimately. This is what happened. So we went to the police station. They took him in the police car. I had to follow them. So what I had to end up doing is going back and forth into the police station and checking on my children. They had put him in handcuffs.
What?
And they detained him for 3 hours. And what I understand was happening is that they said that there was a person with his name, or they thought that he was the person who had, I don't know, parking tickets that weren't paid.
Oh, and that
Yeah.
requires handcuffs, right?
Well,
I mean,
also,
Yeah.
I know that this was during the
Man.
time when he was serving in Washington, so I know that he didn't have any outstanding tickets.
Right,
Okay.
he couldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
but
So
even if,
Right,
like
right,
you get detained
yeah.
for hours in
Yeah.
handcuffs with your
Right.
sleeping children in the car.
So I
in
was
the
just concerned because I had to be going back to, my kids were in the car alone in the parking lot, and he was in there in handcuffs and, just going back and forth. And, ultimately they let him go. And that was it. I mean, nothing came from it.
No harm, no foul, right? No harm,
Yeah.
no foul. Just
Yeah.
3 hours out of your life and the trauma and all that for
Yeah.
nothing.
Right, exactly. And so that's the story. And we had another story too, and this was again during his tenure in Washington. So we were in Washington. We had stayed over in the apartment there, and it was his idea. He said, let's take the Amtrak and go to Canada, to the Great Wolf Lodge in Canada. And the kids will be on the train. They'll think it's great.
You know what Great Wolf Lodge
Yes,
is,
I
right?
did.
Yeah.
Right,
Every
absolutely,
little kid's
right.
heaven.
Okay, my kids were like, I don't know, they
Right.
were like 3 or 4 or
Right.
5, I don't know, very young. So we get on the train and we're going up to Canada, and they have to stop at the border and they check everybody's passports and ID. So they come and they're checking us, and they take him away and they detain him. I don't know what they did to him. And we were stopped at the border for 2 hours. And I don't know where he was.
The entire train.
Yeah, the entire
Well,
For him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least the train waited.
Right. And like, again, I couldn't leave my children and
Right.
try to go and say, where's my husband? What's going on? And this is before cell phones were really cool. And like, I don't know. I think I had a really bad crackberry at the time. It didn't work. If I even had that, I don't know. And he came back and then we went on our way. So, and it just, again, just so many stories about going through airports again with like the Uzis, on him in like France or Italy or, because he just looks like the resident Algerian that's they're looking for, a Libyan person and they're looking for or something like that, And the reason why I want to tell these stories is just because, again, people don't think that this happens.
Right.
And I think that a lot of white folks think that when Black folks say it, and I feel bad about this because I don't want to be, again, the white person that's going to enlighten everybody. Because that's
Please
not
be the white person that enlightens everybody.
But
Please.
You've had this experience being married to a Black man that a lot of white people have not had.
You have
So,
firsthand experience.
Right, but I mean, so do Black wives to Black husbands. But for some reason, it doesn't seem to be. I don't know, like
But you notice the difference in the way you're treated, right?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Because I have another funny story I'll just tell you really quickly about how I'm treated. But the point is, if I have white friends and I've told them this, they say, wow, I can't believe that. I didn't really believe that racism was still a problem or these kind of things were so pronounced. And you told me, and now I believe it. So that's the kind of reactions that I've had when I tell some friends now. They'll say, as opposed to that gentleman we met a few weeks ago, or that was in.
Yes, Nina was part of the whole Fred's protest.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there was this gentleman who said, I've lived here for 5 years, and I walk down the street every day, and I don't see any racism.
A white man.
Of
So.
course.
Well, he was telling this to my daughter.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and okay, maybe you don't see that. That's great. But how does that even, we can't even remark upon that because it's just so silly.
Well, I mean, something that Kelly and we've discussed in previous episodes is this idea that most people only understand the most overt forms of racism.
Correct.
And
Right.
it's the microaggressions that
Correct.
they can't see because they don't know they exist. And, and it's, George Floyd was, unfortunately, he had to die in that horrible way. But that's literally the first time that we've had video footage of a Black man being killed by police. And we got to see it from beginning to end. So there's no room for, well, he didn't comply, or maybe he did this. What happened before the cameras came on? We had the whole story. That's why everybody was able to wake up. So when as you having the position that you've had and being there firsthand to see what happened, and then these people knowing who you are, so there's no doubt as to your character. What you say is gospel, because why would they not believe you, and why would you exaggerate?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you have to be the white woman that enlightens them.
Wow, it's the mantle.
Right.
That's funny. But but it is true. I mean, it's just that's why I want to tell these stories about. But these happen to Black folks every day, and they're still happening. I mean, for me, it was a while ago, but I do want to tell a story of white privilege that will be a bookend to this.
Yes.
And this was when I was married, and I had gone. I did a lot of international travel with my husband because the company for which he worked was an international company. So one time we were in Paris, and the day before we were supposed to return, my passport was stolen or it got lost or something. And so I said, oh, gee, what do you do? So I called the embassy, and they said, you have to come and get a temporary passport or something. And for some reason, we didn't do that. We didn't have enough time or whatever. And I said to myself, I was talking to my husband, we'll take the chance at the airport,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some white privilege. That's a real white privilege.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
Right.
So we go to the airport, and I have this argument with the airline, and they said, well, okay, we'll let you. They didn't. They were very reticent, but they said, we'll let you on the plane because it's not really our problem. It's the United States problem. They're going to give you the problem when you try to get back in.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to take my chances. If you let me on the plane, I'm going to take my chances. So when we get to JFK, my ex-husband says, I'm going in another line. I'm not staying with you because it's not going to work if I stay with you.
Knows,
Right.
Yeah, he already knows. Granted, this was pre-9/11, but he said, I'm not going with you. I said, fine. I said, I'm going to try this. So I get in the line, and I honestly, I definitely, I didn't pick a woman, I picked a guy, and I said, oh, ha, 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 this is 25 years ago. Oh, I lost my passport. Oh, what am I going to do? So, I did have my license, so I said, okay, here's my license. He said, oh, it's okay. Welcome to the United States.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Hold on, let's clap it up for white privilege. No.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can. Oh, side note, when you travel, you should definitely photocopy
Yes.
your passport and keep it in your suitcase.
Or
because
take a
the
picture on your
photocopy-
phone. Yeah.
The
I
photocopy
never
will
do that.
get you
That's
through.
a good idea.
You definitely
Yeah.
should do that. Have a PDF of it at all times.
Yeah, so
That's
you
before
know.
like anybody knew that, or again the
Right.
phones were good, or
we
you had
had
a phone.
friends that happened to in South America, and that's what they were told. Like, just
Yes.
have,
Yeah.
so.
But can you? I just to this day I'm astonished that happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're getting off a flight from Paris. You're an American, I'm happy. I'm happy that was I mean, it's sad because it speaks to just how the inequality of this country. But on a personal note, I'm happy that you're not still at JFK. Right?
We're still in Paris.
Yeah.
stuck
And a
there.
croissant. Or I'd be exactly. Well, again, it just shows the whole
The
point.
inequality. So I kind of feel like you have experienced trauma just by being, because you're part of the equation. When he went through this, you're going through it as well because, it's your husband.
Yes,
right?
but he had an attitude of, well, I not that he would accept it, but he understood that this was how it was, and you just his antidote to it was to be excellent or to achieve. That was his antidote, I guess. But he didn't like, and nobody likes this, but he just understood that this is how it was. What I find more upsetting is now with my children. You see, that's what I find more upsetting, because we're like 25 years later, and I have children, and they, we're still having this conversation.
Right.
We're still having this ignorance. I still have to do things in the school system. They're out of the public school system now, but just recently. But the N-word's used in the school system. In fact, my eldest daughter, the first time she heard the N-word was in our elementary school. She had to come home and ask me about it. I mean, that's crazy.
Right,
Yeah.
because is that being used at home? I mean, it must be, right, for a little child to know
Not
that word, or
only
by-
that,
I mean,
but to know to whom to call
Right.
the N-word, and that it's okay to use the N-word. It's not
Right.
just like the N-word's floating around, and it means it could mean that's a tree or an orange.
Right.
Right.
yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is the proper application of
Yeah,
the word.
definitely.
You
Yes.
know to whom that applies.
Yeah.
Right.
And then later on, in school they would play. I had to go to the school because I said I'm going to the school to talk about this. In gym, the gym teacher would play music with the N-word in it, and the kids are singing along.
Yeah.
And I went to the school and I said, this can't be in our schools, and I don't understand it, but
Was the school receptive at the time?
yeah, they said, okay, we're going to. But, again, for a teacher to bring their own playlist with this in it, and to have it and to,
Kind of normalize it among
yeah.
the kids, yeah.
and it's an interesting thing. Again, my kids are biracial. They very much identify with, and more they identify with their Black heritage. And it's been difficult in this town because there's really not a lot of people with whom they
No.
can.
No, we learned that from, well, I know that from living here, but I think,
Yeah.
Kevin shared the statistic of
when
1.4 or 1.6% of.
When I was driving in,
Mm-hmm.
I saw 4 Black people sitting at one of the restaurants
the whole
on
town. That
motorcycles.
must be
That
the
was,
whole
that was it. I said, "Hey, look at that."
We get a lot of out of town cyclists, so
Yeah.
they're probably not locals.
Well, it's crazy. If I see Black folks around town, I'm kind of crane my neck and think, do I know them? I'd like to know them.
Right.
Or do they live here? That's great. Because it's sort of, I don't know, is that a
Right.
funny thing to do? But it's sort of like, welcome if that's the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. It's so I've been doing, and I know your daughter is involved with the school district equity committee, and I've
Yes.
been doing some interviews with community members related to that this week, and I had one today, and the person I was speaking with, we had such a big, good conversation about affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's very expensive to live here, and it really impacts, I think, the diversity of the community. And then how can we change that? How can we change that? I mean, the rentals are through the roof, and, let alone buying a home. So people from other areas that might want to move in that, they're not white affluent people. I think that helps preserve this white bubble that we live in here.
It didn't used to be that way here. It's I
right.
mean,
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
I have roots here. My family's been kind of around here in many ways since the 70s, and it hasn't always been that expensive because it was a real artist colony. And I don't know how, historically it's gotten to be such a high rental, high real estate. I mean, it's great for people who live here, but I mean, I don't know how.
Just high. The socioeconomic level was pretty high. But so, like, I can appreciate what you're thinking and whatnot, and wanting to have diversity. But if you have lower income people here, then how do they live? Because the housing is just that's one
well,
piece
right.
of
I mean,
it's
kind of in the middle of, like, people that there's not a lot of jobs unless you work downtown.
Right. So you have to have you have to have the ability to travel to your job, right? And then you're living here, so there's your food costs, because everything's more expensive here, So you could have lower income housing here, but then what do you do for all those other facets of life to make life comfortable here?
It's definitely a commuter town anyway. I mean, actually, a lot of people who live here, you'd be surprised how many people. Well, it's different now. The world's different now, but commute to New York.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
my husband commuted to New York for years.
Yes.
From this area. Yeah. So
I mean, so it's like
to go every day, but lots of people go every day to New York City or Newark from here.
So it's that is an issue. So yeah. So it is interesting. I am going to have an interview tomorrow with somebody with the same the equity committee. Yeah. So I'll do that.
Yeah. And I just, before we move on to the next part of what I want to talk about with you, I think it really struck me when we were talking about your ex-husband and his experiences, and it was like, he was so accomplished, and you're right, it shouldn't be about your accomplishments, it shouldn't be about that, but you get to this certain level even within the federal government, and you've done all this for the military, and then it's like, you're still treated like this, and what more could I possibly do?
Because of where you're at, though. Like, think about it, right? So as she said, Nina says, you're not walking around with your resume or something that identifies you as you being this accomplished person. You make this money, you attain this wealth, and then you go to live the American dream.
Right.
But the American dream doesn't want you there.
Right.
So it's so
true.
it doesn't matter what you've accomplished, it's what you represent. And then if you're doing better than those cops that pulled you guys over that night, you're driving a nice car, black man with an attractive white woman in a nice car. You're welcome. And that's gonna piss certain people off.
I guess so.
So.
It's interesting. Well, again, we just have to keep educating ourselves and each other. I mean, I'm always trying to learn. I was just in Richmond, Virginia this past weekend. I took my kids to the Black History Museum there. I took them to Hollywood Cemetery because I'm pretty certain my kids are descended from a signer of the Declaration of Independence on their dad's side.
Wow.
And, there was a monument there I wanted them to see. And I think that, again, and to segue to what the next subject is, we saw a exhibit about Sally Hemings, the slave of Thomas Jefferson and the mother of many of his children, and it's about, my kids were just very blown away by, again, the history of Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy, just how in my lifetime, because they were saying, Mom, you were alive, I said, yeah, just how the laws did not protect civil rights or did not promote civil rights, and how it, what really helps is to have laws protect us, and laws need to change.
Right.
Laws need to change.
Right.
So
and so much of this show is talking about equity, and we focus a lot on race, but there's so many issues related to equity. But one thing that they all have in common is power.
Yes.
or, the lack thereof. And I think that kind of leads us into a discussion about your work, this really important work that you've been doing.
Right. Thank you. Well, for the past few years, I've been working with the Consent Awareness Network, and I'm the chief of staff there. I'm also a Consent Awareness Ambassador in Pennsylvania. And our mission is to correctly define consent, not only in society, but in penal codes across the United States and the world. It would probably surprise you, as it did shock me, that no U.S. state or territory correctly defines consent in their law.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
I actually can believe that.
And
living
over-
in America.
I was floored.
Right.
Yeah, and over 74% or don't even mention consent in their provisions. So
I mean, so much of sexual assault cases comes down to consent, and it's not even defined.
absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
crazy.
So that's our mission, to first of all raise awareness, because people don't know about this. Even though, in the past, especially the past 3 years, this is actually the month when 3 years ago, the movement that Tarana Burke began years ago blew up, the Me Too movement.
Me Too, yep.
And Harvey Weinstein was exposed. So that's been a big thing. Me Too talks all about consent. We have the It's On Us movement that in 2014 the Obama-Biden administration initiated, which is basically something that's in our colleges, in the freshman week, a bunch of kids get together and say, non-consensual sex is sexual assault, and they invite everybody to sign a pledge. Okay, that's great.
Not going to hold up in court.
Right.
Though,
Well, or in the Title IX rules that colleges have, if they want to talk about what is okay and what isn't okay, well, if it's not reflected in the laws, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
So, Time's Up, all these things, we're having marches. We're wearing our hats, our hats. We're holding our signs, and we're demanding, we're talking about consent, and we're demanding, people to be aware of it. And I see, I do so much social media with this work, and I see all over social media, consent is this, consent. Teach everybody about consent. But again, it's not in the law, and it's not protecting us. And this is amazing.
Can you share the example of the case here in Pennsylvania where the jury asked?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
One of the things, we've been doing a lot of work in Pennsylvania because, of course, this is where the Bill Cosby cases, there were 2 trials for Bill Cosby. And yes, in both of the cases, we found out with the transcripts that were provided to us by Andrea Constant, who's been working with us. She's the plaintiff in the Bill Cosby case. So we know that the first trial ended in a mistrial.
Right.
And the jury asked that judge, hey, what's the definition of consent? And the judge said, that is a question that can't be answered. Use your common sense. Okay? So, with that trial went to a mistrial. And then we had the second trial, and I was following it very closely. And of course, the jury came again and said, hey, Judge, Stephen O'Neill's name, what's the definition of consent? And he said, again, use your common sense. You're reasonable people. Okay.
Everything else is defined. What's the definition of manslaughter? What's the
Yeah,
definition?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So in any event, I remember reading in the paper that they were asking this, and I thought, oh no, he's going to get off once again. But they came back with a guilty verdict, and I was really, really happy. And I thought, wow, I can't believe that really happened, because they were asking that question, and that was an issue. Well, we found out later that there was a secret heroine in the mix there, and her name was Cheryl Carmel, and she's working with us in our coalition now. And she was the foreperson. And Cheryl Carmel was a cybersecurity expert, and she was very, very familiar with the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is European law now. And that deals with your data and privacy and all that kind of stuff in the European Union. And in doing that, she understood the meaning of consent and how that was all working with GDPR. And she took it upon herself to educate the jury about what is consent in GDPR. And that's why they were able to come back with the guilty verdict. Now, we can't have...
Right?
Yeah. We can't have Cheryl Carmel in
On
every jury.
Yeah,
No.
you're not going to have
No.
a show.
No, no,
We're
no.
not going to. And you know that Cosby's coming up. You know, his appeal was granted. That's coming up in December. And, you know, again, his appeal wouldn't even be probably granted or heard based on what he's asking for it to be heard about, you know, if we had consent in our law. I mean, so we're talking about money and time and all this kind of stuff, you know. Same thing with Weinstein. When the Weinstein jury was deliberating, they came back and said, what's the definition of consent? And what did the judge say? Judge Burke. He said, use your common sense. Because in New York, there is no definition for consent in the law. So again, coming back with that verdict, our director and founder of the Consent Awareness Network, Joy Short, happened to be, you know, in the lobby of the courthouse, you know, during that time, and you know, she was able to be there for the ruling. They came back with the guilty verdict, but you know, at the sentencing, this is what Weinstein said. They said, "Do you want to say anything, Harvey?" And Harvey said, "Yeah, okay. I just want to say, I'm so confused, and I think that men are just so confused." Okay, let's define consent.
To protect both sides.
Exactly. Well, that's
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it only makes sense.
Well, so you know where we live, right? We live in the United States, right? And all the foundation of all our laws, everything that we do in the courts was designed to protect only one demographic.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so the better they are at defining these situations, these laws, writing these, being specific in law, the harder it is for them to be able to dole out justice the way they want to. Whereas this person gets thrown under the jail, where this person, we don't want to ruin his chances at going to college and whatnot. And that's what it's all about. Right.
Yeah.
You just, the more specific you get, the harder it is for people like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby and all these other people to get away with things, because now it's like it's black and white and cut and dry. So it's a deeper, I mean, this is a significant problem, but the problem is way deeper than just in this particular instance. It's the whole system really needs to be thrown away and started new, because of the fact that the beginnings of it was to protect the white guy.
Right. And that other people were property. I mean,
everybody else,
They were
everybody
owned,
on this
so-
camera right now, if this was however many years ago, we wouldn't be able to do none of this. You know,
that's true.
You know, so.
Well, this is a 14th Amendment issue, really, because, you know, it's about equal protection under the law. I mean, and it's a human rights issue. I mean, you know, defining consent would assist in so many. Well, first of all, consent is a matter of, you know, fraud and theft in the law. You know, we understand what it is in that. Why is it not applied in sexual assault? I mean, but you know, defining it here would help with human trafficking. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, it would help with that. So, you know,
Can you tell us the definition? What is the definition?
well, what we're looking for, and this echoes what's in the GDPR, is consent is FGKIA, which is freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement. And,
Makes
you know,
sense.
yeah, and so we're not really looking to necessarily even create new laws. We're looking to amend the laws that are already on the books. We're looking to say, when you mention consent, you say consent, that is, freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement. Because I'll tell you a few kind of gruesome stories. The way our laws are set up with sexual assault are very strange. First, I want to just say that we do have a separation of our assault laws. There are laws that are for assaults like, you know, if I beat you up or I break your arm or I break your leg. And then we have sexual assault. That's one thing the law did properly, because the law does recognize that there is a special, unique defilement that occurs if someone is sexually assaulted. So that's something that they did do right. Okay, that's good. But unlike murder, where in the laws for murder, we don't have a whole laundry list of how you can get murdered, and we make, you know.
if you get murdered with a bat.
Yeah, okay,
If
yeah.
you get murdered with
a
gun,
you know,
yeah.
right. But if you read the sexual assault laws, they're really kind of gruesome, because they a lot of them in many states, they talk about like, if this touches this or this makes contact with this, it's really, awful to read, and
And
it's
it's so
gruesome.
different, right?
Yeah,
Every
and
state.
every state has something that's different. And I like
Right.
to call it like, if you're in a box with a fox with rocks, and just like
Right.
when you're murdered, there are really an infinite number of ways you can be murdered. And so with sexual assault,
Yeah.
like some states would have a law that would say something like, okay, if if somebody impersonates your husband and sexually assaults you, then okay, that's against the law. But if somebody impersonates your boyfriend or your
Isn't that crazy?
wife, that's
Right.
not against the law.
Will you talk about that? And
The
Joyce
case
talks
at
about that in
Purdue?
her,
Yeah.
and she does, and we should mention the TEDx that Joyce does too, because
Yes.
that is really
I hope
informative.
we'll have to, if you could do the link. Yes, we have a number of things on our website, consentawareness.net. There's something that everybody should watch, and it's Joyce Short's TEDx talk that will really kind of give you a great intro and provide some understanding with why this is so necessary, and sharing some anecdotes and further information. We have a video for kids about consent on our website. It's also great for adults because it gives a great definition of the three forms of agreement, which are consent, assent, and acquiescence, and why they're so different. And there's just all kinds of things in our blogs and ways you can get involved. And if you want to sign up to be a consent awareness ambassador, all this kind of stuff, and how to speak to your legislators. And yeah, so here's something that happened in Indiana at Purdue University. There was a student there, and she was hanging out in a dorm room, her boyfriend's dorm room, with a whole bunch of kids. At colleges, they're all hanging out. And then it came time where I guess the evening was winding down, and her boyfriend got into the bed with her, which was his bed, and everybody fell asleep in the same room. They're all just, falling asleep. So in the middle of the night, it was dark. She's feeling that her boyfriend is engaging her, in sex, I suppose, and she's responding to her boyfriend. So this goes on for a while. Then she gets up and she goes to the restroom. When she comes back to the bed that she was just in, and she sees somebody sitting up in the bed. It's not her boyfriend. It's somebody that she doesn't know. So she's very confused. She runs back to her room. Then she finds out that her boyfriend is in her bed, so she comes back into the other room. And, the guy who was engaging her in sex,
That she thought was her boyfriend.
yes, admits that he fooled her, admits that, that she didn't know who it was, and, kind of was amused by it, I suppose. Well, they end up calling the police. This young man, Donald Grant Ward, was arrested. He was tried for rape, but he was ultimately not convicted. Why? Because it is not against the law in Indiana to trick somebody into
Right.
having sex with you. Now, if there were the consent law on the books, consent is freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement, and non-consensual sex is sexual assault, then he would be,
Such a
responsible.
crazy loophole.
Yes,
Right.
and then not only that, his record was expunged.
Of course it was expunged, because why does he need to have his life ruined
Yeah.
for tricking someone into having sex? And going
Exactly.
through that horrible ordeal?
Exactly. I just want to show you this funny. I don't know if it's going to glare, but this is what we call it. We call it a Swiss cheese umbrella.
Yeah.
Full of legal loopholes, and that's what we
Definitely.
call it. And I'll tell you one more story, and these happen all over the place, but I'll tell you another story about Alaska. There was a perpetrator called Justin Schneider, and there's a cultural practice in Alaska where people still hitchhike. So Justin Schneider picked up an indigenous Alaska woman, and they made an agreement that he would drive her to the next town or something like that. Well, the next thing she knows, she's lying on the side of the road, coming out of unconsciousness, and this is indelicate, but she's feeling that her face is all wet, okay? Well, Justin Schneider is arrested for sexual assault, and he goes on trial, but he is exonerated because that particular form of sexual assault is not on the laundry list of sexual assaults in Alaska.
Oh.
Okay?
Like you said, there's not a laundry list of the ways that you murder someone.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we can just agree again that non-consensual sex is sexual assault, then we're done.
Yeah.
It's very elegant.
That's it, right?
Seems
That would
pretty
be
simple
very.
and
It should
basic.
be concise. So So my question is: so you said you just want to amend. So why not go for new law? because I feel like if you amend, right,
Mm-hmm.
you're still kind of you're still inheriting a lot of the BS, right?
Yeah.
Which then lawyers can use, find loopholes and whatnot. Where if it's a new law, you make it airtight.
I think that however we can get it in, we should try to get it in. But I also want to make sure that we don't keep just plugging loopholes, but we want to make sure that we get in whatever we can to say that this is the definition of consent. And I do want to speak to the legal community, because some of the pushback that we do have is from the legal community, and it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
You know, we have laws against murder because murder's wrong, okay? But a lot of times, like a question that a legal person might ask is, okay, well, how will we, proceed in court if this is something that we get on the books? And, our question is, well, sexual assault is wrong. And we want to, define consent in the law, because first of all, consent is peppered throughout most sexual assault laws already across the United States and the world. All we're asking to do is to define the term, okay?
Right.
So, it's not really a problem, or, we don't understand why you're asking, how is it going to go forward and how are you going to process? It's not really the issue. We want to define consent because it's the right thing to do. It will help in, lowering sexual assault and prosecuting sexual assault. And all we want to
make it clear on both sides. Like you said, like it
Right.
protects both sides. I don't see.
right.
know,
We
like-
want to define the word, and the
Right.
word, the definition of the word is what it is. It's immutable.
They're not dumb. They're very smart.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
the problem is that we live in a patriarchal society.
Well, that's
right?
very true.
And we have men who are in high position. They have power,
Mm-hmm.
and they sexually assault people all the time.
Right.
Right. We just hear a little bit about it,
Mhm.
but it happens all the time. So by not defining consent, they're protecting themselves, and when it
Yes.
goes to court. I feel like the way around that is just an aggressive ass marketing campaign where
Mhm.
the definition of consent is put out into the public sphere so that a jury knows what consent is, and it doesn't have to be on the law books, because you know what I mean. It's like it's just, we know what consent is. It doesn't have to be explained in that way.
I think that it is becoming, again, when you go through social media, there's a lot of people that say this is what consent is. And some of it is what consent is, and some of it is provisional. It's not what consent is necessarily, but it's kind of close to it. And, there's a lot of educational things that are happening. And I think that that's good. But, we have to plug the loopholes, because, again, if it's not on the books, again, if you're asking what's the legal definition of it and it doesn't meet it, you're going to
Yeah,
have
I
the
do
attorneys
agree.
aggressively pushing back. Like this happened in the Purdue case. It's like, yeah, Donald Grant Ward said, I had sex with that girl. I did. I admit it. But since the law was in his favor, and the law didn't say, tricking somebody into sex is
Right.
against the law,
Yeah.
that's the end of it. That's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean it sucks.
It's
It
called
makes me
nulla pena sine lege, which means no punishment if there isn't a law for it. I mean, that goes back to way back to Roman times. If there's not a law in the books, there's no punishment. So but it is true about this whole chattel. I mean, in ancient Roman times, if a woman was sexually assaulted, it was a crime against the father.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And then, but of course, it was okay for the father to sexually assault his slaves.
Oh.
And this, came all the way into just, very recently into our history in the United States with slavery.
Right.
I mean, it can't, think about it. It's only very recent in our country's history when that was okay. And it's the only thing that changed that was the law.
Right.
That's the only thing that changed it. The same thing about desegregation, Brown versus the Board of Education. Nothing changed. The goodwill of the people maybe motivated it, but what changed it? The
law.
law.
The law, yeah.
There's an anecdote.
Why are people so worked up this week?
Yeah.
About what's going on? And,
Well, it's true.
Washington's.
I don't know if you guys saw. There was this great series. I think it was Showtime. It was called Mrs. America. It was about. It was about the women's movement in the 60s and the 70s, and it was about Phyllis Schlafly, and it was about, and they had everybody playing like Shirley Chisholm and Bella Abzug and Gloria Steinem and Jill Ruckelshaus, and anyway, it was really cool. Had great, wardrobe.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, it is. It's cool. But in any event, it was a great scene in it, and the scene had somebody playing Ruth Bader Ginsburg and somebody playing Gloria Steinem, and there was some sort of like march for the ERA, for women's rights, and everybody's with their signs, ERA today, and Gloria Steinem, and I don't know if this ever happened or if it was apocryphal or whatever, but Gloria Steinem said to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, "Look at the turnout. This is fantastic. Wow." And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the character, said, "That's great, but it doesn't matter until it is the law."
Right.
Right.
Because, you can be happy about it, you can talk about it, you can spread awareness, but we're not protected.
So what can we do?
That's a great question.
This
Well,
cause?
you can go to our website because we have a lot of articles and stuff about how to do that, how to reach your legislators. You can contact your legislators and ask them, will you codify consent? You can.
And you're making real progress in some states, right?
We are. Well,
pre-COVID, when
yes,
the
we
legislatures
were to introduce this legislation on April 7th, which was was it not? It was Sexual Assault Awareness, National Sexual Assault Awareness Day. And but unfortunately, COVID happened, and any kind of legislation that was not COVID related.
Yeah, the state houses just kind of shut down.
Yeah,
for
it's
months.
just it's just so we've been really pushed back about that because everything really demands the COVID attention, and so we were very excited to do that. But we brought on again like the Cosby trial folks, Andrea Constance working with us, the Weinstein folks, we've been working with Rose McGowan, the plaintiffs there, Jessica Mann, Tara-Leigh Wolfe, Dawn Dunning, Paula Williams. There's so many, forgive me if I've forgotten them. They've been on calls with us with legislators.
That's awesome.
We've spoken to legislators across the United States, Utah, Alaska, Massachusetts, obviously Pennsylvania. It escapes me how many other states, but there are a lot of other states.
And it's an international.
Yes, we have
movement,
consent outreach ambassadors in Nigeria and Pakistan, India, Canada, Hong Kong, the UK, because consent it's not defined across the earth.
Right.
They're fighting in the European Union to even put consent in the law, like saying, we need the word consent in the law, but they don't have the definition of it. So again, unless there's a definition, what does it mean? Yeah, so
use your common sense.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. There are horrible problems in India and Pakistan and of course in Africa, rape is horrible. We have in Nigeria we have a lot of reps in Nigeria. So it's a women's right thing. It's a human right because men are victims of sexual assault as well. So you can to contact your legislators. And we have some hashtags: FGKIA, freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement; codify consent. I will codify consent. Will you codify consent? I think the biggest the biggest thing here again is awareness, because before I began my work here, I did not know. I took for granted that this was just covered in the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, you would think.
Right.
I mean, common sense, like that it would be just covered. Like we wouldn't get to the point. You would go through the whole process and you'd reach to the point where the word consent, which is not a word that a sixth grader wouldn't know.
Correct.
That all of a sudden everything, the wheels of justice comes down to that, and it doesn't happen because we don't have a legal definition of consent. Man, let a bunch of men start getting raped under those concerns. You know what I mean? And I mean that sounds horrible, but if men being sexually assaulted started really happening a lot, and then
I
consent
think
was a
it probably
thing.
does happen a lot.
I
But
know,
yeah.
but I mean, if it hit the if it was in the courts and men were in danger because of it, I
Right.
bet you consent would be defined at that point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of memes about things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like oh yeah, consent means.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So
Frustrating.
we have a TEDx talk. I would watch that. I would read some of our materials, and just you know uh, speak to your legislators. I mean, tweet, email them. We have templates for all that, and just again to just be aware because
What's your website again?
it is consentawareness.net.
Okay.
And I have an Instagram called Stand Firm Voice. And then Joyce Short, our founder and director, her Instagram is Your Consent. And there's just again a lot of information. She also has a book that's actually it's really kind of more of a pamphlet or a manual. It's called Your Consent: The Key to Conquering Sexual Assault. It's probably about a 30-minute read. And it has at the end all the laws in every 50 states, all the 50 states and the territories about what's going on in your state. And it's a really comprehensive, it's the definitive primer on consent, really. She's really, to me, she's the international expert on consent, and any state who's wanting to do anything with regard to writing any kind of legislation or trying to promote it really needs to get in touch with her. But we just fight things all the time. Like for instance, in Indiana, I was just watching. Joyce had put together some testimony and a video from the Weinstein survivors and plaintiffs, and and a whole presentation about why defining consent is so important, because they were doing a consent panel, some legislators in Indiana. And the head of the panel ended up saying something like, well, it's not apparent at this time if we need a definition of consent in Indiana. And not only that,
If you don't think that a definition is needed after hearing about that college student's experience,
right,
then,
that's the
I
state.
Mean, you are
that was
exactly,
her.
that
It was
is
her
the
own
state,
home state,
Purdue.
correct? And then she declined, even after there were 3 other legislators from both sides of the aisle asking her to please include it. She declined to add to the findings of the committee any kind of assurance that we're still working on it, we're still considering it, we are still doing the research.
Call your legislators.
Yeah,
Call
exactly.
your legislators.
I mean, I don't know
Craziness.
what kind of political, chicanery or shenanigans is. I'm sorry, that's what came to my mind.
Right.
That was going on there, because again, to me, I don't see that this is a red or a white issue, a Democratic or Republican issue. This is a bipartisan issue. We want to protect people from sexual assault. We want to make it easier. We want everybody to understand and not be confused.
And like I've been saying the whole time, it even protects those who are accused.
Exactly.
I mean, because it clearly defines the terms.
It
shouldn't be a controversial topic.
Exactly.
But in the Purdue case, it's just I'm having flashbacks. So when I was attending to University of Delaware, I worked for media services, and one of my jobs was to make copies of recordings of hearings from students. So I heard a lot of sexual assault. Just recounts of what happened, and all that I can think of is these legislators that don't want to define it. They're flashing back to their college experience, and boys will be boys, and just we're not going. We don't want to really go down this road, because they're looking, when they see the young college student who tricked a woman into bed, they're seeing themselves like, oh yeah, if they didn't do it, they know somebody that did it is part of the whole college experience, and that my blood is boiling right now. So I will add to what we can do to help. We just our sons, men, teaching about not consent,
what it means.
stop that, because dealing with the law is very important. but that's also tantamount to dealing with the symptom and not the illness. And
Yes.
the illness is people should not be sexually assaulted. They shouldn't be touched if they don't want to be touched. They shouldn't be misled into doing anything that they don't want to do. So while the fight is being fought to define consent and work on this legislatively, we as a culture need to be mindful about teaching
Well said.
all of us to be respectful of each other. I mean, good Lord. I just,
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you, Nina, for this important work that you're doing and sharing it.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm kind of, like educated on subjects like this, and
right.
I was completely clueless.
This
so,
is
I
new.
mean,
This
yeah.
is
As was
new.
I.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I was gobsmacked. Just,
There you go. I like that.
That's
That is
another
that's wonderful. Perfect.
yeah. It's just, to me, it's like, what do we say? We say, this isn't rocket science.
Right.
Define the word. That's what we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have to come up with the exact definition? Has it already been defined? Do we have to? Is that what we need to do? We need to come up. Maybe that's what we need to do. Come up with the
They
exact.
have it. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, it's not even that we've made it up. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
consent is. It's freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement. It's a very specific kind of agreement, and
Maybe-
it's the
Freely
kind of
given, knowledgeable,
informed
informed
agreement.
agreement.
So maybe we can come up with different variations of it and say, pick which one you like, whichever version
No,
of
we
it
need
you.
that. The problem is we need a standard definition.
Well, no, I'm
You know
just
what I
saying
mean?
for them, for that maybe that one is not resonating with these people as to why they're
Well,
not.
I mean, the thing, but again, our assertion is, a rose is a rose is a rose, right?
Right. Yes.
Consent is consent is consent. It means what it means. I mean, it's like I said, it's immutable, and you take it and put it in one place. You take a rose out of the garden, you put it on a table, it's still a rose. Consent is freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement. There's a couple of other agreements, and they're not consent.
Right.
There's assent, there's acquiescence. They're different,
And they get confused.
They make it. Yeah.
and they
no.
get confused. I mean, but I mean, there's so much. We're out of time, but yes, they're different.
No, it's beautiful. When are you writing your book about helping the black people though as a white woman? When is that
We like that
coming
work,
out?
too.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you have your plate filled, but I mean, that was no, because I don't want to lose sight of that part of the interview. I mean, and what you
Your
shared,
memoir.
because no, I mean, that's very critical. I keep saying familiarity is what will solve a lot of these problems, and that perspective increases familiarity and understanding.
Well, it certainly, opened my eyes. I mean, it certainly gives you empathy, gives you understanding. And, I mean, that was I wouldn't say it's a very unique experience, but, I don't know if there's a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it by the Reverend Billy Graham. And he said, what's going to help, eradicate racism is intermarriage. That's what he said.
I think Billy Graham was just trying to get little strange, little brown strange up in his life, but
I don't know, but that was a radical thing to say.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's cool,
Mm-hmm.
but here's my problem with that. Right, it doesn't change the sick thought patterns because if you don't have a problem with black people, then it moves on to gay people. Or moves
No, but I think the concept though is there that and you can step back and just say like the more diverse your network is, right? You don't have to be married per se.
You don't
but-
have to be, sure,
Right.
of course
I mean,
not.
No. But I'm saying like it could be how many friends you have that are different than you, how many colleagues and
Right.
coworkers you have. You can, whether or not it's a spouse. But I think I understand that sentiment. I mean, the more you expose yourself and love and care about people.
yeah, but I think he was really talking about just making a race of yellow people. Like, yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? But that would be the result. I mean, if everybody if interracial relationships, then you have basically South America, right? But the problem is that then it turns into now you're differentiating from people because you're a little bit browner than me, or you have different, your hair isn't as nice as mine. You know what I mean? There's a mentality with racism in that this does, it's not unique
Like
to
white,
just
white will always be the ideal.
Right.
Yeah, that's never that's not going to cure it. Certainly, you can be married to a POC and not be, and still have your. I mean, I'm always trying to, get better and better. I mean, listen, my children consider themselves people of color. I mean, they are people of color. Black children. Sometimes they roll their eyes at me with the things that I might say, or
Right.
and they're like, Mom, that's not the way to think, or you shouldn't have said that, or and I am thinking that I'm like with it. No, not all the time. So my point is, like, I'm always learning, and I'm the mother to black children.
Yes.
You would think that that I have nothing wrong with me, but no, not at all. I mean,
No, the way, I mean, what Brandon said about you sharing your experience, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of white people that are not going to listen to the experience coming from
Yes.
a black person, a person of color's
Right.
mouth.
that is absolutely true.
But they will listen to it if it's been the experience of a white person. Right?
Isn't that
Right.
stupid? But it's true.
stupid. But I
Right.
mean, that's that's
'Cause
our
you're
privilege,
familiar.
and that's the platform that we have.
You
so
you are familiar.
I'm just like them.
You're just like them. You're one of them. So if you say it that's what it is. So
That's why I wanted to say, talk about it tonight. And like I said, I hope it's not offensive. And I didn't want it to be like, okay, because I said it, it has, I hope that that's communicated here. I don't want it to.
no, it's not. I mean,
No, if
I'm not married to a person of color, and I sit here and talk about race like
Well,
every
listen.
week. So I mean, it's just the
Nina.
more we talk about it, and the more we are comfortable talking about
Nina,
it, the
if
better.
somebody's offended, let them be offended. They can get over it tomorrow, and maybe and maybe though after they get over it, then they'll really think about what was said, and it's about intent. Like you're
That's
not up
true.
here, you're not up here trying to be the savior, the white savior. You're just you're just sharing your experience and letting you know
appreciate
it's
that.
real. It's very appreciated. So thank you. Waiting anxiously for the book.
Okay.
The second book.
Second book. So, maybe it can be a double twofer.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Or then I'll come back and talk about the book.
there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to share? Do you want to promote? You want to
Well, I would like everybody to, if this is upsetting to you that consent's not defined, please join us. Check out our website, check out the Instagram, contact your legislators. They're the ones who are, the ones we have to prod and poke.
right.
They get, lost in what they're trying to do otherwise, like COVID stuff. I mean, we have a great bipartisan thing going on right now. If everybody gets reelected, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we're going to see. But, both sides of the aisle are for this. They should be for it. And, it should be really simple. But, politics get in the way sometimes, and other things get in the way. And the legislators need to hear from their constituents. And that's,
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
Make it a priority. And if you're not upset, then there's something wrong with you.
yes.
Because you
I
should
agree.
be upset about this. No one listening to this should not be upset about what was just discussed about consent. So if you're not upset, something wrong with you.
You're not listening. And I also just
Yeah,
want to
you're
say
not
that whenever we go to legislators are surprised that this isn't defined in the law. They are also agog.
Yeah. I'm loving how she's throwing these words out there. I love it. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Hold on. Let me
Gobsmacked.
Scott's right. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so we'll make sure that all these links and everything are attached to the podcast
Thank
and
you.
up on the YouTube channel. Please follow them on social media. Start using the hashtag. Start talking about it. Please start talking about it.
Please.
Use your many platforms to get this going. And again, if you have sons, teach them to be nice and not sexual assaulters, please. And about what consent's all about, and respecting women, and respecting people in general.
And
So,
girls too. This is a two-way street.
yes.
Absolutely.
Kelly, what do you have to say as we close out? And
I just have to say thank you, Nina, for
Thank
coming
you so
and
much.
talking about two very important and related topics tonight. And we really learned a lot, I think. So,
I'm very enlightened.
yeah.
I'm upset, but I'm enlightened.
I
But
so
really
appreciate it.
that.
Thank you.
No, seriously. Because if you're not learning, you're not growing. So, and growing's painful. And so, I grew a lot tonight. I'm in pain. So, so, so I'm seriously upset. So Nina, anytime you want to come back and talk about more things,
Okay.
Seriously, not an empty promise, whatever.
Thank you.
Just this stuff breaks down and sets back up real easy, so we can make it happen.
Thank
so
you. I enjoyed my time here. Thank you for letting me speak about these things. I appreciate it.
we enjoyed having you,
Appreciate you.
guys. Please consent. Learn about it. Badger your legislators about it. This is what voting matters. And I know we're all caught up with the presidential election, but it's the local elections that matter. It's your local politicians. And actually, there's a website. It's called votequadrant.com, and it talks about voting, how you vote on your local level to like handle for justice. So like if you want to, right now the thing is justice, right? The justice system doesn't have justice. So, voting for the mayor and the DA and judges and all that, voting properly. But that algorithm can be used for other things like this. So local elections matter. So this is the time to push this kind
Don't
of stuff.
just vote every 4 years. Vote in every election.
And
Absolutely.
make consent a priority in what you're asking for from your local politicians. So
Thank you.
yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, we're getting out of here because I'm cold and these bugs are
Big.
they're big and they're
they like
flying
the
around.
lights, yeah.
They like the lights. So guys, thank you very much. Please make sure you're subscribed to this show and that you're following, that you're commenting, that you're liking, you're sharing, and you're discussing what is being talked about here and spreading the word, okay? Because we're trying to make the world a better place.
We are.
All right, guys, we're out of here. Until the next
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.